It's an honor and a privilege to be here this morning with you. I see a lot of familiar faces from several years ago. I used to attend this church quite often with some of my family members, and I was excited to be able to come back here today because it does kind of feel a little bit like a church home to me. Many of you can remember way back in 1991 when I had a diving accident and became paralyzed, and I know you remember it because I've got cards and letters from you in the hospital, and many of you prayed and helped support me and my family during that time. But I look around here and I see that there were a few of you that weren't thought of yet back in 1991 as well. And so it's good to see all of you and to see the church moving forward here with young and old alike here worshiping God together. I have a few things that I'd like to share with you today that I believe God has laid upon my heart to share just specifically with you today, but also a message that I believe He has given me to share with the world. I was telling somebody this last week that I feel as if when God gives you a gift, that it is your responsibility to go and to share it with other people. And as I look back at my life over the last 20-some years, since that diving accident happened in 1991, I feel as if God has given me something that I am supposed to share with the world. When I look back to the first couple times I went to share my story with a group of people, I was in Pittsburgh, Kansas at the South Broadway Baptist Church. And I had just finished telling the story of how I had ran and dove off of a boat dock and broke my neck and ended up being paralyzed from the shoulders down as a result of that poor choice of mine to run and to dive without thinking about what might be the consequences of how deep the water was, and telling about how difficult it was to accept the doctor's prognosis that I would never be able to walk again because my spinal cord had been severed. And telling a little bit about how God had given me strength and comfort in spite of that unwanted circumstance and allowed me to go on with my life and realize that Romans 8:28, where He says that He will work everything together for good to those that love Him and are called according to His purpose, was one of those promises that I felt like was at work in my life. And so I was just finished telling all of this to a group of people, and a young lady came up to me afterwards, and she just kind of stood there in front of me like she wasn't really sure what to say, but I could tell something was on her mind. She looked up and down my body that wouldn't work, and she looked at me in the eye and she said, she said, "You don't really have much of anything, yet you have everything." She said, "I want what you have." And as I began to think about her words, I began to realize that God had given me an amazing gift. God had given me a joy and a peace and a sense of purpose in the midst of a circumstance that I really didn't ever know if I was going to be able to have those things or not. Because as you are probably well aware of, there are things in life that when we are confronted with them, they cause us to doubt a lot of very fundamental things that we often build our lives upon. We sometimes find ourselves in the midst of circumstances that cause us to wonder if life is still worth living. They cause us to wonder things like, does God really still love me? Does God have some sort of a plan and a purpose for me? And that's kind of where I was shortly following my accident, with a lot of doubts and a lot of questions for God. Wondering, waiting, hoping that He would give me some answers to the prayers and the questions that I had. And I can remember night after night following my accident that I would lay in bed and I would pray and I would cry, and I was so disappointed with myself because I felt like I knew that it was my choice to go run and dive off that dock. But I kept thinking, God, it'd just be such a great miracle if you would allow me to walk again. Allow me to get up and do the things that I love to do. And I remember struggling and thinking that I just wanted God to come into that hospital room and to give me some answers, maybe at least tell me just exactly what he had in mind for me, what kind of plans he had further down the road for me, because I was always one of those kinds of people that I really liked to know what purpose and meaning was behind the different events of my life. I wanted to have some sort of a direction and a purpose behind everything that I did. And I couldn't find any of that, and it seemed like God was silent. And every time that I would pray and try to ask him for answers to the questions that I had, and I was searching for that direction and meaning and purpose, it seemed as if he was just simply quiet. And sometimes I believe when we go through tests in life, God is like that school teacher who teaches and teaches and teaches, and then when it's time for the test to come, he just kind of sits up there at the front of the room and watches to see what we do. Never saying a word, but they're up there watching. And, as I look at life and I begin to look at my life specifically, the things that I've been through, I know that there have been many things in my life that I've found were difficult to deal with, many things that I wish that I could change. And if we were to go around the room today, I'm sure that you could raise your hand and testify to the fact that there have been many things in your life that you maybe didn't like. Maybe it was your own mistake that caused you to be in a circumstance that you didn't want to be in. Maybe it was somebody else's mistake. Maybe it just happened you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or maybe it's just because we live in an imperfect world and things happen sometimes. We're disappointed. We lose things that are important to us. Other people hurt us sometimes. We make bad choices. But nevertheless, I'm sure that each of you would agree that you found yourself face to face with an unwanted, unchangeable circumstance at some point. And you've had to make a decision. How am I going to respond to this circumstance that I found myself in?